All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is gradient. Here it is. Gradient is the rate of change of the y variable value to the corresponding change in the x variable value. So in other words, gradient is a change in y over divided by the corresponding change in x. The change in y is called the vertical rise, and the corresponding change in x is called the horizontal shift. From coordinate geometry, everybody should remember that gradient is y2 minus y1, which is the change in y, the vertical change, over x2 minus x1, which is the corresponding change in x. In some instances, the word rate or the term rate of change may be used instead of the word gradient. Now, the unit of gradient, that is when you're doing topics that require a unit, for example, like physics, and for some topics in mathematics, like when you're doing traveling graph, the unit of gradient would be the change in the y variance, the y value, the y variable unit per x variable unit. So if the y variable is, let us say, meters, that's distance, and the x variable is like, say, seconds, the unit of the gradient would be meters per second. So that is what it is saying. Stay with me. Now, gradient of a straight line is a constant, meaning that it doesn't change. The gradient of a straight line is a constant, meaning that it does not change. Now, the gradient of a curve is different at every point along the curve. Now, the gradient of a straight line is a constant, which means it doesn't change. And that is why any 2 points on the straight line gives the same gradient. The reason every 2 points on a straight line gives the same gradient is because the gradient of a straight line is constant. Guys, the gradient of a straight line graph, before that, the gradient of a curve is different at every point along the curve. And that is going to be explained when we're looking at gradient of a curve. Guys, gradient of a straight line graph. Now, if you're asked, and this you should have learned from coordinate geometry, if you're asked to calculate the gradient of a straight line graph, you need to first identify 2 points on the graph itself for which the coordinates are easily determined. You need to note the coordinates of the 2 points. Then you need to calculate the gradient using the formula m is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1.